I've already started to melt. Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Heather and as always I'm reading with a vengeance, and as always I hope you are as well. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. If you are new to my channel, a very warm welcome to you. I hope everybody is doing very, very well. How is everybody's summer doing? Summer has finally arrived to New England and I am melting. I am doing this first thing in the morning. It is July something-teenth. And I am doing this first thing in the morning because I have to turn off the ACs because then the noise would be horrible. So I want to make the noise as minimal as possible. Hopefully I don't rush through this, but I'm not complaining about the heat. I absolutely love it. I love, love, love the heat. Is everybody reading a bunch? Not reading as much as they'd like? I feel like my reading has slowed down a little bit. I'm not sure if it's from just because of all the summer activities. I've been doing a lot of knitting for like birthday gifts and stuff because knitting is my other obsession when I'm not reading. While I can knit and listen to a book, obviously I can't knit and read a physical book. So, but then we've also been super busy. We went on a motorcycle ride yesterday. We're doing an ice cream trail that Connecticut has for the month of July. There's like 12 or 13 ice cream places around the state, and of course you have a little map and you can get it stamped at each one. And my husband and I like to ride the motorcycle to different places because of course he likes to ride the motorcycle, I like to eat ice cream, and together our hobbies meet. So we did that yesterday. Went to 3 different ice cream parlors yesterday, so that was good. Our refrigerator is on the fritz, so we had to go shopping for a refrigerator. Why can't shopping for appliances be as fun as, say, shopping for shoes or, hey, I don't know, books? Yeah, that is so boring. I mean, I imagine when you get all the bells and whistles on a refrigerator, getting the refrigerator in the house is fun. Yeah, if you're under 30, you're probably not gonna appreciate this. Anyways, we're not getting a refrigerator with all the bells and whistles because we'll be selling our house. And I'll talk more about that little life change, I think, in another video. Got a plain Jane refrigerator, so we did that on Saturday. I do want to mention that so I'm obviously in the United States. And if you don't live in the United States and you live under a rock, you probably have heard that the Supreme Court decided on women's bodies again, and not in their favor. And there I go again, being an American, thinking, oh, well, if we're America, so everybody should know our business, and if you don't, then where are you? Oh my God, that's so American, right? Like, we're the center of the universe. I didn't mean it like that. But pretty big decision by the Supreme Court, and it's archaic, it's sad, and it's quite frustrating and aggravating. But in light of that, I saw a video that Scott over at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot did, and the thumbnail is actually pretty funny. It's books about abortion. And would I have called it that? I don't know. But it is basically a video he does spotlighting books that address abortion and pro-life versus pro-choice and those kinds of things. And it's a fantastic video. It inspired me a little bit. It kind of inspired me to do my own video about it, but I couldn't do it justice. It's a great video and I just highly encourage you to watch it. He talked about some books that I already have on my TBR, and then he also mentioned some books that I hadn't even heard of that went on my TBR immediately. So I will direct you over to there if that's an issue that means something to you. If it doesn't, it should. And I just wanted to mention it here. Oh, I've mentioned before that I probably will do a book haul for my birthday because my birthday's in August. And, you know, what does every book lover love to do? And that is shop for books. But like I mentioned before, we are going to be selling our house. And so part of that endeavor is going to include some downsizing, like some major downsizing. Again, I'm not going to get too much in the details. That being said, I probably won't be doing a book haul purchase or book purchase haul. I will likely do a library haul. And then I also might do what I did last year, and I might buy some books to sprinkle along in some of my local little free libraries. We'll see. I haven't decided yet. But I know I've talked about it in a couple of videos that I will be doing this big birthday book haul, and I have to retract that statement. But I will be doing something fun for my birthday, of course. Oh, big thing that I wanted to talk about. I wanted to thank everybody. I reached 500 subscribers and I couldn't be more pleased and tickled. And thank you so much. I really am happy to know that so many of you are finding joy in these videos, and I'm happy to have you here. I love engaging with you in the comments. Sounds like Jake is saying thank you as well. Okay, bud. Anyways, thank you so much, and I'm glad you're here. And like I said before, I love talking with you in the comments, and it's just been so much fun for me. All right, so we're here to talk about the books that I have read in the first half of July. And I think I've been sticking to my TBR fairly well. There will be some, of course, books that I didn't mention in my July TBR. I think I might actually succeed in reading all the books that I set for myself in July. So let's get started. The first book that I read in the month of July was Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Yes, I have not read this yet, or I hadn't read this until recently. I don't know why I didn't read this as a child like every single other child. Yeah, I finally read this. Thankfully, it was short. The struggle, of course, I had with it was the language. You know, it was written in, the 18th century, I think. I think it was like a 1760. Let's look, shall we? Don't have my glasses. I was about 100 years off, 1883. So of course it's written in the language of the time. I struggle with that, and that's the biggest reason why I have, as an adult, not read a whole lot of classics. I struggle. This one actually, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. The story was simple, it was fun. Of course, it follows Jim Hawkins, a young boy, who kind of gets involved with this pirate scheme and seek of a treasure with some good people and with some bad people, and it's just kind of an adventure story, and it was cute and it was okay. I mean, I'm glad I read it. You know, I don't want to be known as a Philistine for not reading certain classics. Would I recommend it? I mean, one of the things I did find fun about it is there are a lot of things that originated in this book that continue to be referenced today. You know, Long John Silver, Blind Pew, drawing a blank off the top of my head, but there's quite a few in here that originated in this book, originated in this story, and are continue to be referenced in other books, literature, even pop culture. I appreciate that, and I'm sure, of course, that is a big part of being a classic. So there's that. I love this cover. There are a couple of cheesy covers for this. I've looked at other editions. I did like this one, and I like it was a little pocket, Signet Classic, and it's a little pocket size paperback. And it's only 200 pages, and if you're looking to, tick a box for read classics, this one's pretty easy. Like I said, I did get lost in the language a little bit, but I think my threshold is a little bit narrower than most. It's relatively easy as far as classics go to get through. For enjoyment for me, I gave it 2 stars. The next book I finished in the month of July was In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. Talked a lot about her and her books. The first thing I read from this author was her collection of short stories, which was Her Body and Other Parties. And I struggled with it a bunch. I finished it, but it was not without struggle. And I wasn't sure if I was going to read anything else from her, even though there was, a lot of talk about her memoir, In the Dream House. And then I think I had somebody comment, I think I had multiple people comment on my videos where I said that, and they said, do yourself a favor and read In the Dream House. You won't be disappointed. It's totally different from her collection of short stories. And I will say, yes, it was totally different. I did have a better enjoyment, and it was a unique take on a memoir. You don't know, it's her memoir of an abusive relationship she had for many years. She never names her partner in the book, but I imagine her partner reads this book and knows exactly who she is. And there might be, I mean, I'm sure if I did like a deep dive on the internet, I'd probably be able to find out who it was and what she has to say about the book. But I didn't bother with that. I don't know, I felt like I would have been prying a little bit too much. So anyways, the book itself, yes, I did enjoy it. It is, I mean, I think the trigger warnings, if you need trigger warnings, are right there on the synopsis. There were some disturbing parts of emotional abuse in addition to physical abuse. And the uniqueness of this book is that each chapter, I guess you would call it a chapter, they're all short chapters, which I enjoyed. And each of the chapters are named, and the names are kind of based on tropes, genres. That chapter is kind of written in the style of whatever that trope or genre is. I thought that was very unique, and it definitely added to her story. She wanted to tell her story of being in an abusive relationship. I don't think she didn't want to victimize herself. And she wanted to get points across without saying, woe is me. And I think she did a really good job of that. And just kind of an example of what she did, like one name of a chapter was an address, and I can't, of course, remember the address off the top of my head, but it was the address in the old movie from the 40s, a movie called Gaslight. And of course, the whole chapter was was an example of how she used to be gaslit all the time by her partner. I think it's interesting if you're reading the book and of course you're not familiar with the address, you would do what I would do, and that's of course Google it and look it up and find out it's from this movie. Now, once I found out it was from this movie, of course I was familiar with the movie and I was familiar with its reference and how we use the term gaslighting today. If you're not familiar with the movie and you're not familiar with where the term gaslight comes from, I think that was a really great addition to how she wrote this book, because there are several chapters where I'm like, what does this reference mean? So I thought that was great. I thought that was a really interesting way to tell your personal story, and I think she did it successfully. There were a couple of, just a few chapters in there where I was kind of lost, and she's got this writing style that I think is a little bit over my head, so it's not not knocking her writing style at all, just sometimes I kind of get lost in it, but for the most part, yes, I definitely enjoyed this more than I did her collection of short stories. If you like reading memoirs and how she tells her story in a unique way, if that intrigues you, then yes, I absolutely encourage you to read this, but be aware, there's some significant abuse in this book. It can be troubling for some. I gave this 3 stars. The next book I read in the month of July was The Paper Palace by Miranda Cowley Heller. This book I listened to on audiobook, and the only reason I even heard of this book and was interested in reading it was, of course, I followed the Women's Prize for Fiction, and this was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. And it was one of the first ones, once I heard the long list, it was one of the ones that I cherry picked that I thought would be the most interesting. And I kind of waffled back and forth since then, based on some other booktubers' reviews. But this is one of those books, what do they call it, Marmite books? I mean, there's no middle ground for this book. There's a lot of people who love it, and there's a lot of people who hate it, and there's no middle ground. I will tell you that I loved it. I actually was surprised by it. Not a whole lot happens in this book it's literary fiction, really, and it kind of tells the story, this woman's life. And it opens up with a bang, pardon the pun. But in the very first chapter, you basically know that, what is her name? Elle. She is at a kind of a summer cottage that she shares with her family and they go to every summer. And while her family is inside the house, she is outside with her childhood friend, with Jonas, and Jonas and Elle have sex while their respective families are inside the house. So she has cheated on her husband, Jonas has cheated on his wife. So that happens in the very first chapter, and then the rest of the book is kind of going back, you follow her life, and even goes back to kind of her mother's life a little bit, and all the events that lead up to Elle's decision to be unfaithful to her husband, with her, basically Jonas is her best friend now. Yeah, I loved it. I loved her story. I loved the writing. And so listen, I don't usually give trigger warnings for books. You know, I mentioned it on in the dream house, just because the trigger warnings are right there on the cover of the book. I just don't usually do trigger warnings. I just don't. But for this one, I have to. And if you don't want a trigger warning, I'll put, I guess, a timestamp here to fast forward to if you don't want to hear what I'm about to say. Trigger warnings in this book for sexual assault. And I'm doing it this time because I just don't get triggered very easily, if at all, really. I think not in the true current sense of the word triggered. I just don't get triggered. But for this one, sexual assault in this book, it actually, I mean, it got to me. You know, I'm not going to say I went and crawled in a corner and wept for several hours, or I need to up my medication or go see my therapist or anything like that. But reading it, it was quite disturbing. I mean, the way it was written, and let me say, it was very well written, very well done. I think the point she was trying to get across, not only was she successful at that, but also, I mean, she wanted you to feel what this girl who was sexually assaulted felt. Very disturbing, very creepy. It wasn't graphic. I'll tell you that right now. It wasn't graphic. It just gets under your skin and in your head. And I mean, it's terrifying. It was terrifying. There were 2 scenes, I want to say, that, wow. So just be warned about that. I don't say, I'm not going to warn you against reading this book. This book was just very well done. And I think it was it wasn't gratuitous. This scene needed to be in the book. The story needed to be told, but just fair warning. At the risk of, you know, TMI, you know, I'm a survivor of a childhood sexual assault. And while I have worked through it as an adult, I've many years, I talk about it freely with people who want to listen, people who ask questions. I don't talk about it very often. You know, it's not like the subject comes up at dinner parties, but it's something that I don't have a problem talking about. But it's still a part of my history, part of who I am. So I can understand why reading about it can be a problem for people. So I did want to give this particular trigger warning. All right, so there's the timestamp. So anyways, so yeah, this is basically a book. It follows Elle's life, how she becomes the woman she becomes, what decisions that she makes during her life, the choices she makes. And really, essentially, that's what this book is about. It's how the decisions and choices we make shape us as people. And how they lead to other decisions and choices. And I thought it was fascinating. I couldn't stop listening to the book, and I looked forward to listening to the book. I will give you fair warning that the end, I mean, some people say it's not an ambiguous ending. I think it is an ambiguous ending. You are not quite sure who she chooses. And I really liked that. And I liked how it was ambiguous on whether or not it was an ambiguous ending. So you can either choose to believe, well, yeah, it's clear who she chose. Or you can believe that, oh, it's left up to the reader who chose or who she chose. So I really appreciated that. I gave this 4.5 stars. The next book I read is basically, it's a cookbook that I checked out from the library. This was kind of set up like this instead of like this, and that's why I picked it up, because it's got this beautiful cover. I mean, I love a foil cover, but it did speak to me. It's called Charred by Genevieve Taylor. It's the complete guide to vegetarian grilling and barbecue. So basically vegetarian for me and grilling and barbecue for my husband. I had to bring it home to see if he was on board, because my husband is the cook in the family, thank God. It's a beautiful book, beautiful pictures, and yeah, lots of good stuff. That's the Rainbow Chard Cheddar and Mango Chutney Grilled Cheese. I did flip through here, and a lot of the recipes, I mean, there's a couple of ingredients where I don't think I would be able to find in my local grocery store. But one of the things that I will be taking note is some of the sauces and dips that are added to these dishes that look amazing that I would be able to make. So, and a lot of the stuff that that are already in my diet as a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian for about 15 years now, and have the options come a long way. I mean, I'd never checked out a cookbook from the library, and I'm glad I did. And I think it's a smart way to go if you find, if you're interested in a cookbook, to check it out from the library first if they have it available. And I probably will buy this sometime in the future because it did have a lot of yummy, yummy stuff. The next book I read for the month of July was Beatrice and Virgil by Yann Martel. Put it right here. I listened to it. Fortunately, it was only 6 hours. I put this on my TBR many, many years ago after I read Life of Pi, which is also, of course, by this author. I loved Life of Pi. And I know that's another book where there's a lot of people who hate that book. But I absolutely love Life of Pi, and I added this book to my TBR because, of course, of the author. And one of the reasons it took me so long to finally get to it is it's got the lowest average rating on my TBR on Goodreads. And it kind of worried me. And, I went back and forth, do I want to read it? Well, yes, I want to read it because Life of Pi isn't as highly rated as I rated it. There are certain books that just aren't for everybody, and maybe this one was one of them. And so finally, I read it, and it's got the low average rating for a reason. Unfortunately, I started listening to it, and I almost DNF'd it because as I'm listening to it, there were multiple times where I'm like, what in the actual F am I listening to? But for some reason, the narrator did a good job. I was intrigued enough to find out where it was going. So basically what this is, it's kind of an allegory on top of an allegory. Basically, it follows a man. He's a writer. He's a fairly successful writer, and he gets a letter someday from a man who says, I'm a writer and I need your help. And Henry is the writer. But anyways, for whatever reason, Henry goes and meets with this man who asks for his help. And this man ends up being a taxidermist. And so Henry goes to this taxidermist shop. Taxidermist, who that's what he's referred to, I think, through the whole book, is the taxidermist. He tells Henry the story. And it is about this stuffed monkey, and they don't say that in the taxidermy world anymore. I forget how they refer to it, but in the taxidermy shop, there's a monkey and a donkey together, and the taxidermist says that's Beatrice and that's Virgil. Virgil's the monkey and Beatrice is the donkey, and he tells this story about them. That was the first point in the story where I was like, what is happening? Because the story, the initial snippet that the taxidermist tells about this first conversation that they have with each other is about a pear and how much Beatrice wants a pear, the fruit, a pear. And it's like a conversation that goes nowhere. And you're like, what is happening? But still, I was intrigued. Why? I don't know. So he continues to tell the story of Beatrice and Virgil, and you realize what's happening, and you realize that it's an allegory on the Holocaust. It kind of goes from there. It got to a point where I was like, oh, and got intriguing, and then it got weird again, and I didn't have the best time with this book, unfortunately. Yann Martel, I guess he really likes talking animals, and I don't have a problem with that. This one was weirdly done. Life of Pi, if you read that, he's referring a lot to religion, whereas this one it's referring to the Holocaust. I will say also that there's one story, I guess, again, another trigger warning. I guess this is a video full of trigger warnings. I don't think I've ever given a trigger warning before. But there is a scene where some terrible things happen to Beatrice and Virgil, And it is quite disturbing. It is graphic, the violence. And I think what makes it even a little bit more disturbing is that you know that while the taxidermist is telling the story about a donkey and a monkey getting abused, you know that it's actual people that he's talking about. And the terrible things that happen to people in general during the Holocaust and during World War II in general. And it's graphic and it's terrible, and just be warned about that. And I wouldn't recommend this book anyways. So I didn't love it. I gave it 1.5 stars. I think the author made a clever attempt at what he was doing, and I just don't think it was executed as well as it could have been. Yeah, 1.5 stars for this one. The next book I read in the month of July was The Way of the House Husband, Volume 4. I have mentioned this before. I think I mentioned it in my mid-year freakout, that the books that have made me happy so far this year. And I was reminded when I made that video, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've only read the first 3. And so I picked up Volume 4. I'm not sure when I'll get to Volume 5 because I think Volume 4 is the last volume that my library has. They're super cute. I've mentioned these before, and it's basically about, he used to be like the head of the Yakuza, which is a Japanese organized crime gang, and he used to be the head of it, and he retired and he got married, and he married a woman who is the breadwinner in their family, so he is the house husband, and it talks about his shenanigans as a house husband. He cooks, he cleans, he shops, he goes to yoga. Yeah, he's super cute and funny, and I like the way the story is told, and they're easy. I mean, and the art is fairly simple. It's a nice little palette cleanser. And, oh yeah, Kousuke Oono. I didn't mention the author's name. And yeah, they're super fun. And if you want, if you have any interest at all of trying manga, I recommend this. It's super cute and relatable. Yeah, in this particular book, it tells the story of he's helping, I think, a young kid open a business, a bubble tea business. You know, they're having the conversation of how you have to get the quality powder, and you have to, cut it just so that it's certain percentage pure. And if you didn't know that they were talking about bubble tea, and you were listening to their conversation, you would think they were talking about drugs. And that happens a lot in these books, and it's kind of funny. It's cute. So yeah, I recommend these. I think I gave this 3.5 stars. Yeah, 3.5 stars. The other book I picked up in the month of July that I wanted to share with you, that I mentioned in one of my most recent wrap-ups. I think in my recent wrap-up, I talked about another graphic novel that I read called Exquisite Corpse by Penelope Bagieu. And when I talked about that book, I talked about this one, and this is the very first graphic novel I ever read. It is called Brazen, Rebel Ladies Who Rocked the World. And it is a nonfiction graphic novel, and it highlights several historic women, and I will give you a couple of names. She talks about Nellie Bly, Mae Jameson, Josephine Baker, Nazik Al-Abid, Betty Davis, Temple Grandin, women who have made a difference in history. And she basically gives just a little blurb on each one. Not a little blurb, like they give about 3 to 5 pages, beautifully illustrated, full color, lots of humor, and kind of gives a mini biography on each woman, where she came from, kind of how she grew up, the circumstances in which she grew up, how she got into whatever it is that she made her stamp on the world with. It's absolutely fantastic. This is a beautiful edition. This is kind of a trade paperback. Like, this chapter is Margaret Hamilton, who is the actress who played the Wicked Witch of the West. And it's got this full page, it's kind of a Wizard of Oz theme on that page, but just it tells her story. I absolutely love this book. 5 stars on this book, and I just wanted to share it with you. If you have a chance to get your hands on this book and you like graphic novels and you like hearing about women who rock, yeah, I highly recommend this one. So I just wanted to share it with you guys. I did have one DNF for this month, well, at least so far. I attempted to listen to Dear Girls by Ali Wong. I'll put the picture right up here. I don't know if it would have been a better experience if I actually read the physical copy. She reads it, she narrates it herself. Now listen, I like Ali Wong. I think she's funny. I like her comedy. I liked the movie that she did on Netflix. I appreciate her. So this is a memoir. It's called Dear Girls because it's ostensibly a letter to her daughters. Yeah, I had to DNF it. Listen, I'm a grown-ass woman. I don't mind potty mouths. I have a potty mouth myself. I don't mind talking about gross stuff. I don't mind talking about bodily functions. I don't mind that stuff, but I don't need to hear it at a constant. I don't know. I think there's a time and there's a place and there's an amount. And with this book, I mean, I got into chapter 3 and I was like, I just thought it was just too much. I mean, there were a couple of stories that were funny, graphic, vulgar, but funny at the same time. But then the graphic and the vulgar kept on and on and on. And when it keeps on and on and on like that, it's just not funny anymore and it's just gross. I just couldn't anymore. And then I think it's kind of tongue in cheek where she says that it's letters to her daughters, basically life advice and what to expect being a woman in today's world and that kind of thing. And she tells stories on how she met her husband and becoming pregnant and having the babies, and those are good stories to tell your kids. But the way she tells them, at some points they were funny and then it just got, too much. Another thing that I didn't really like, and usually, when people talk about how they listen to a memoir on audiobook and the author is the narrator, and that's usually the best way to go. I didn't like her style in doing it. Her tone would she'd be talking like this, and then she'd bam, 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 and then the punchline would be this different tone of voice. Sorry about that. That was really unpleasant, even in my own head. But her tone would be, telling the story leading up, and then, and tone of voice that she used was very unpleasant, and it was constant. And she'd go back and forth between the pleasant tone and then the abrasive tone. It was very jarring, and I didn't like it. So yeah, that was a DNF. Sorry, Allie. And finally, the last book that I've read in the first half of the month is The Devotion of Suspect X by Keigo Higashino. I picked this book up during an independent bookstore day last summer of 2021. And it was one of those things where I'm like, I'm just going to pick some book off the shelf randomly and surprise myself without reading anything about it. I did that and I was actually super excited about this. This is Japanese fiction translated. I haven't read a whole lot of translated work, and I don't know if it's a thing for Japanese literature, how the style of this was written. You're following Yasuko, and she is a young woman. She's a single mother. She's divorced from her husband. She lives a quiet life. She's raising her teenage daughter. She works in a sandwich shop. Ex-husband is kind of a pain in the ass, and he's always coming around asking for money and trying to manipulate her into giving him money. And one day he comes over and bad things happen and he ends up dying. And Yasuko she gets a phone call from her next door neighbor who she's only seen in passing, and he comes and gets sandwiches from her sandwich shop. His name is Ishigami. She gets a phone call from him saying, you're gonna need help with that body. And she's like, what the heck? He ends up helping her. And then you're also following Detective Kusanagi, and he's got the case and he's trying to figure out what's happened. And he has a friend who is a professor at a college who he's a longtime friend. I think he's a physics professor. So he's super, super smart, and, he's an attention to detail type of guy, and he's a figuring problems out type of guy. And so Detective Kusanagi runs sometimes the details of his case with his friend, the professor. And it turns out that the professor used to go to school years before with Ishigami. He takes it upon himself to try to investigate the case as well. So the story goes from there. It's more of a mystery and kind of a character study. It's not much of a page turner. It's a little slow in parts, but I did like learning about the different characters, and they have their quirks. But one of the problems I had with this book is that, first of all, you find out what happened to the victim and who did it in the very beginning. You're kind of following the detective along as he's figuring things out on his own. But when you're the reader and you already know, what's the point? So I had a kind of a problem with that at first, and it kind of made up for it a little bit at the end. And I'll get to that in a second. The other problem I had, and I don't know if this is a factor in all translated works or if this was just poorly translated, I'm not sure. But the tone that I got from this is, how you're watching, have you ever watched a foreign movie and instead of reading subtitles, you decide to listen to a dubbed English version? So you're hearing the English language or whatever your mother tongue is, but the mouth moving is not matching. That's the best way I can describe how it felt to read this book. I felt like the dialogue that I was reading, I felt like the tone was off, and I felt like they're not words that would have normally been used. I just felt like it was a little bit kind of disjointed and just not quite right. So I prefer reading subtitles in movies. I can't stand a dubbed version. It's just weird, and I just got that feeling of the way this was translated. I just got that feeling. So I felt like the dialogue was cheesy in English, and I don't think it would have been in Japanese, if that makes any sense. So that was the other problem I had with it. I will say, however, that they made up for you knowing what happened in the beginning to the victim. They made up for that, how they ended it, and basically the thing that comes out at the end, and I don't think this is a spoiler, is finding out exactly what Ishigami did to help cover up this crime and why. And that made up for knowing what happened in the crime in the very beginning. I won't say more than that because I definitely don't want to spoil it for you. I gave this 3 stars. It almost was a DNF, I will say that, but I will say that I'm glad that I didn't DNF it because I had been looking forward to this for so long because I am new to Japanese literature. Will I follow in the series? This is the first in a series, I think. And although it says number 3 in Goodreads, but the first 2 are not available in English, at least not that I could find. So I don't know. Will I continue in the series? I'm not sure. I don't know. I haven't looked at the, there's an excerpt to the next one called Salvation for a Saint in this book. Did I read it? No. Will I? I don't know. I just don't know. Maybe. But yeah, I gave this 3 stars. And that is it. That is my mid-month wrap-up for the month of July. I hope everybody is having a good reading month. Have you read any of these books? If you have any thoughts, I'd really love to hear about them down in the doodly-doo. If you are still watching at this point, I'd really appreciate if you gave that like button a boop, and if you would subscribe. I am really enjoying doing these videos, and I hope you are enjoying the content. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.